It's a very small structure, not many rooms, and it was in one of the rooms inside this house that was approximately about 12 feet by 12 feet where the Council of War took place. This is a view of the backside of the Widow Leister house, and it is along the Taneytown Road. The building is currently locked, so I can't get inside, but looking through the window gives you an idea of what the inside of the house looked like. This is the other room. When Longstreet renewed the attack at around 4 o'clock on July 2nd, it turned out to be a very, very bloody day for both sides. The Union Army had suffered pretty heavy casualties on July 1st, and by the time this council started, and it opened up around 9 o'clock on July 2nd. By that point in time, the fighting had already started to die out over where Longstreet launched his attack, but it was getting ready to be renewed, and I pretty much probably had already started, over on the Union right, the areas of Copes Hill and East Cemetery Hill. And Meade wanted the opinion of his top-ranking officers as to what to do next. So the meeting was held here in this building. Pretty safe to say it was held over there, the window to my extreme left. And it was a small room, as I mentioned, about 12 feet by 12 feet. And 12 men gathered in that room to discuss the fate of really not only the Army of the Potomac, but the fate of the United States of America. So who was in attendance at that meeting? Well, besides General Meade himself, he also had his Chief of Staff, Dan Butterfield. Butterfield was a holdover. He was originally Chief of Staff for Meade's predecessor, Joe Hooker, but due to the crisis and the timing of Meade becoming Army commander just a few days before this battle, he asked Dan Butterfield to stay on. Also present was Army engineer Gouverneur K. Warren. However, he was there in body, but that was about it. Unfortunately, he suffered a slight wound to the neck earlier that day, and he pretty much slept through the meeting. Also there were the two wing commanders, Winfield Scott Hancock and Henry Slocum. Now, I want to point out that Meade kind of thought by this point in time that the wing commands no longer really existed because the Army was concentrated right here at Gettysburg, and I'll make mention of why that's important in a moment or two. So also we have representatives from each of the 7 infantry corps. Representing the 1st Corps was General John Newton. On the first day of the battle, General Reynolds was killed. Command of the 1st Corps was temporarily handed over to Abner Doubleday. However, Meade and Doubleday really didn't get along. Meade kind of questioned Doubleday's military ability, and he was replaced by an outsider, General John Newton, who was from another corps. Representing the 2nd Corps was General John Gibbon. So basically, you could say the 2nd Corps was represented by 2, Hancock and Gibbon. The 3rd Corps was represented by General David Birney. You have to remember, on July 2nd, Sickles, who was commanding the 3rd Corps, is badly wounded, would lose a leg here at Gettysburg, and he turned command over to David Birney, so he was representing the 3rd Corps. General Sykes, George Sykes, represented the 5th Corps. Representing the 6th Corps was General John Sedgwick, affectionately known by his troops as Uncle John. Representing the 11th Corps was Oliver Otis Howard, and the 12th Corps was represented by General Alpheus Williams. Now, Meade did wonder why Williams was here, because Slocum was here again. Meade had thought the wing commands were kind of dissolved now that the Army was concentrated here and engaged in battle. But because two representatives came from the 2nd Corps, Meade did not ask him to leave, did not challenge it. And it would turn out that the two most junior officers present, Gibbon from the 2nd Corps and Williams from the 12th Corps, actually did the bulk of the talking here and offered the bulk of the suggestions during this Council of War. So what do we know about this Council of War? Well, as I mentioned, it started around 9 o'clock at night, and it would end, well, it would go on for a while. And how I know that is because General Williams did not return to Culp's Hill, which is not very far from where I'm standing, not until around midnight, when the fighting had really started up again over in that sector. The Confederates began the attack that evening. Unfortunately, it was not timed very well, and it was really after General Longstreet's assault had ended. So the things that were discussed here was really the condition of the Army and whether or not it should remain here. Now, Gettysburg is rather unique for county seats in Pennsylvania. It has many, many roads leading to the town. Okay, it is the county seat of Adams County here in Pennsylvania, and one book I read said that not even Harrisburg had as many main roads leading to Harrisburg, the state capital, as Gettysburg has leading to its town. And if you look at the situation on July 2nd, the Confederates controlled most of those avenues. Just trying to go around in a circle here. They controlled the Hagerstown Road. They controlled the Chambersburg Pike. They controlled Mummersburg Road. They controlled Harrisburg Road. They controlled York Road, and even Hanover Road, really leaving the Union Army just two roads to supply it, the Baltimore Pike and the Taneytown Road. So there was real concern about resupplying this army and keeping it fed. That will come into play here at this meeting. So after some time and allowing the generals to speak freely about the condition of the Army, 3 questions were then posed by Chief of Staff Butterfield. And these questions were then open for discussion, and it would be the responses to these questions that General Meade would base his decision as to whether or not to stay or to retreat to a better location closer to their base of supplies. So, first question that was posed by Dan Butterfield. 1. Under existing circumstances, is it advisable for this Army to remain in its present position or retire to another near its base of supplies? And that was a real concern. As I mentioned, there was only 2 roads that could supply Gettysburg, and the nearest railroad junction that had supplies that was in Union control was down in Westminster, Maryland. And supplies would have to be sent here by wagon. Supplies when I mean ammunition and food. And that was a real concern. However, it was discussed and realized that, despite heavy losses, the Union Army was still in a pretty good position. Also, I want to point out that there was an organization created, and this organization did aid General Hooker at Chancellorsville up until Hooker started to ignore them. And the organization was known as the BMI, Bureau of Military Information. And they were very good at their job. And they were able to supply General Meade, by the night of the 2nd, facts that Every one of Lee's divisions had been engaged thus far, with the exception of General Pickett. So basically, what they were saying was, you have been hit by the entire, or almost the entire, Army of Northern Virginia, and you've held your own. That also was important to General Meade. Second question was, after they determined to stay here and fight, second question, to remain in position, shall the army attack or wait an attack, and for how long should they wait? Well, it was agreed on the night of July 2nd that the Union Army would wait for Lee to attack again, believing that Pickett would arrive sometime before the morning of July 3rd, and thus Lee would renew the attack. So they decided to wait and not go on the offensive, to remain on the defensive. And then, if they wait for the attack, how long? And the conclusion here was they would wait one more day. If Lee did not attack on July 3rd, then the Union Army would attack on July 4th. As we know, Lee attacked on July 3rd in what would become known in history as Pickett's Charge. So the decision was made here in this house on the night of July 2nd to stay and fight it out here at Gettysburg. Now, a lot of people fault General Meade, President Lincoln included, for not pursuing Lee's army hard enough. Now, I want to point out some facts that often get overlooked. Meade, again, becomes Army commander on June 28th, but much worse than that. There was a real logistics problem here. These Union soldiers, many of them, especially in the 6th Corps, did a forced march to get here as quickly as possible. And what did not follow the army was food supplies. And some of the men here went day and a half, 2 days, 3 days without eating a real meal. And there was real talk here at this Council of War to go out into the countryside and round up whatever food they could find. Here's the one problem with that idea that often also gets overlooked, is a lot of the farmers here ran their livestock out of Adams County when they heard the Confederates are coming in, because the Confederates were commandeering for the war effort any kind of food supplies they could find in this area. So people were running their horses, their cattle, their hogs out of Adams County. So to think they could just go down the road to a farm and find supplies to feed an army was, in many ways, they were deluding themselves. So the decision to stay here and fight was a tough one to make, because they were very far from their base of supplies. That this Council of War ended very late, went on for about 2.5 hours, and by the time General Williams made it back to his command, that area was under attack by the Confederates. And due to the fact that troops were sent to other parts of the battlefield earlier in the day, there was nobody in the Corps command position on Culp's Hill to direct things. Maybe it was a mistake for both Slocum and Williams to be here at this Council of War. For Civil War Reports, I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak. Thank you for watching. And if you like what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up. Also, notify your friends. Let them know about this channel and ask them to subscribe as well. If you like, you may leave a question or a comment below, and perhaps I will answer your question in a future episode of Civil War Reports. Until next time, please keep the history alive.